Thanks so much, guys. Really, really appreciate a good turnout directly after lunch. There's nothing like presenting in the room that was used for the Lunch and Learn so that you have the smell of rosemary chicken lingering in the air. That's always a good way to, to sit back, relax, and kind of have that Zen moment. Really, really excited to be here. I'm a first-time BriForum speaker. I got a chance to meet some of the crew at various events over the not-too-distant past and really took a liking to this whole area of FUIT and started recounting some of the anecdotes of my own IT career that was based around this. So I wanted to share that with you guys and hopefully teach you some of the lessons learned, because effectively I fought my users and the users won. So a real quick background just about myself in terms of who is this guy that's caffeinated and jumping around up in the front. David Stafford, born and raised in Bay City, Michigan. Anybody ever heard of it? A couple? Awesome. Bay City, Michigan. Bay City Rollers, their name was picked. They threw a dart, hit a dartboard. Also, I was born in the same hospital as Madonna. That's my claim to fame. A lot of people look at me and say, oh my God, this guy is like 18 years old. What gives? So I wanted to prove that's what I was doing when I was 18. I was actually an IT guy at a chemical manufacturing company called Dow Corning. Dow Corning, they are really big in the silicone industry, and they made a product that was typically sold in pairs. That product resulted in one of the largest class action lawsuit settlements, and so I got to handle managing IT desktops during a downturn. I have impeccable fashion sense. If you guys think that I'm just some vendor wonk that has never lived a day of this in my life, I can assure you, no, I've spent as much time underneath the desk as the next guy. And then I moved to North Carolina, where I went to work for a great company known as, no, not that one. I went to a great company known as Cisco, where I got to manage a whole bunch of desktops in their entire end-user computing space. And 2 years ago, I kind of moved into my dream job where I'm now in the CTO office for VMware and get to work in a lot of the future-looking advanced development projects for end-user computing. So it's really, it's a candy land getting to work with an absolutely remarkable team that I have the pleasure of seeing many of them in the front row today. Obligatory graph. You can't do a good session without having a proof point illustrated by graph. I absolutely love end-user computing. I am the most passionate guy you will find when it comes to managing the IT space for end users. So much that I said there's only one thing that could be better than managing IT for Dow Corning, but go manage it for Cisco. And that sounded like a pretty good gig, right? I went from managing desktops for Larry, the pressure vessel integrity guy, which, by the way, I would love to have that on a business card. I am in charge of pressure vessel integrity. To managing IT for the guy that freaking invented TCP/IP. I had the guy that wrote the spec for DHCP, that wrote SIP. These were my end users, and who the hell am I coming out of, under a desk in Dow Corning in Midland, Michigan to tell this guy how he's going to use his computer? So we've already heard the dictionary definition, but if I was to present this to a less educated audience, we'd have to go into the whole Latin dictionary of he was once in control or she was once in control. And that would be fine if that was what it was, but we all know that this is really about FUIT. So I quote one of my inspirations in life, a guy by the name of Gabe, and I started telling him all these stories about all the things that my users did to me. So I think we're all an 18 or over crowd. I was telling him stories about how I had people that created domains in WINS called shit-ass-fuck. And they registered it in WINS so that it got propagated everywhere, and everybody would go into the browse list and they would see shit-ass-fuck standing out right at the top of the list. And how they hacked around my login scripts and changed the names, and Gabe's like, yeah, but that's not really, that's not really the core of FUIT. You really need to keep it around the premise of people just trying to get their jobs done. And I'm like, interesting. FUIT isn't necessarily all that new. It's been around for a while. You know, I remember back in the days when we took them off of mainframes and put them on Windows 95, I remember what they did. They went out and they dropped out on the public share sheep.exe. And anybody remember this? You remember the sheep? You remember the Christmas lights? So what were these users doing? Were they trying to get their job done? Well, what they wanted is we took them off this blasted 3270 terminal, and now they have a little bit of freedom to personalize. And at the end of the day, like, I am IT, you shall not run Christmas lights on your Windows 95 desktop. That could have been our opinion, but in reality, what was happening is sheep.exe, for those that remembered some of the variants of it, it actually spawned a child sheep.exe process for each and every one, so that depending on where you slid the slider control about how many sheep you wanted munching on the grass of your Windows 95 desktop, you would actually be going back and running all of these little 1 megabyte instances of sheep coming off of your public drive, and that was where we saturated the network and why we got to where we are today. So that's my example of some retro FUIT that maybe some of us can relate to back in the day. Now, this is a real-life street sign out of my beloved Michigan. And you get this idea of how IT tried to combat FUIT originally. It was, I'm going to lay down the law with policy. And if you refer to section 32.7.21 of the Commercial Code of End User Computing Guidelines, I'm going to tell you how you can and can't do it. And if you're in a chemical company, maybe you can be a little bit strict. You've got FDA guidelines in medical technology areas. But when I took these policies that I knew how to draft better than anybody, what I got was blatant disregard when I took it to Cisco, where they said, I like your policy, and I'll show you what, I got a policy for you right here, sucker. So what would that result in? It would result in maybe the user getting their hand slapped. But you guys all know as well as I do, if you are the top performing sales guy in the organization, if you're delivering 120% on quota day in and day out, does that boss give a rat's ass about what you're doing with the PC that you've had dropped on your desk? No, what do? You get a get out of jail free card. And off you go about your business to go and have a great day. So that was all good and fine. And as people started to discover and learn more of these things, we always talk today about how great self-service IT is. And how really what we want to do is we want to encourage a community. You know, maybe we need to put them in, you know, the enterprise Facebook or the enterprise Twitter and get people sharing all of these things. Well, this was the hell that I lived for 7 years. The #1 place that people would go once they bought their Mac was Wiki. Amazing website, running on a server under a guy's desk out in San Jose, California somewhere. And you would go out there and you'd get all the stuff that you need, like how do I VPN in? Well, anybody had the good old IPsec VPNs that would have group secrets and shared secrets? Yeah, those were always fun, right? There was a website that you could go out and you could drop the hash in, and you'd drop the hash in and it would decrypt it. And it was especially funny when people had, you know, let's just say colorful group secrets that the users were never actually supposed to know about. We also even had my favorite email list of all was IT Flame. And so IT Flame, it wasn't bad enough that they would use that to discuss what IT was trying to do to screw with them, but this is where they basically would allow their frustrations to get out. And IT Flame, inevitably, you know, we were doing an IMAP over to Exchange migration, and so all of the, you know, kind of the die-hard standards guys, they would be on there going, this sucks, IMAP is, you know, the world, and Exchange is the devil, and they would sit there and they would flame everything about IT Flame, and then I got to the days where I started managing desktops a little bit, maybe a little bit too heavy-handed, and the way that I could always diffuse it is when people got mad at me for how I was managing desktops, I would just go and post back, yeah, but we're on Exchange, boom, and instantly it would dovetail the conversation off into La La Land. So the way that IT goes about taking care of this problem is what do? Deploy more agents. How many of you guys can look down today on your start bar and you see the next to the clock, right, the sys tray? Virus scan, encryption software, antivirus encryption software, auto update service, Cisco Security Agent, that was one of my favorites. You get this laundry list of things to the point where users actually, this was always fun, they went to 2 rows. They dragged their start bar up a line so that they could fit even more sys-tray applets, because you also had Yahoo Messenger that needed to sit down there, weather bugs so that you could see what temperature it was outside, because we never get out. All of these things were the way that people did it. So users started disabling these things. They said, aha, we've learned that if we go in and we start right-clicking closing or doing an end task, or even the really savvy users, they went into services and started setting services to stop or disabled. So I love the gray on white, but effectively this is a snippet straight out of my login script where I was looking for the Altiris agent. Quick shout out to my friends from former Altiris. Hi, Andy. Good to see you, man. This was the life that I lived, where every single time the user would log in, go in, stop the Altiris agent. That'll shut down the inventory scans, the software update scans. This will get it out of the way. So what do? I log in and I do my magic VB script, and if it's not set to automatic, set it to automatic, start the service. If it wasn't removed, go back and put it in. And this was all fun from a login script junkie perspective. So the user went to VBS, right-clicked, open with, Notepad, yes, do it from now on. Thank you, have a nice day. So it was even better when the guy would do this for the poor, the poor secretary that had nothing to do with IT. And because I put my name and my email address at the top of the login script from a support perspective, I would get these phone calls coming to me. Dave, you've got a virus because every time I log into my machine, I'm getting this Notepad document opening up with your name in the top of it. It was because some, shadow IT guy went and bypassed it. So reassociating Notepad to get around VB script was their first step. And then people got really super clever, and they learned that user init was the parent process that called login scripts. And if you go in and you just mess with user init, that's another great way in order to get around login scripts firing. And so little by little, I'm losing control, and I'm trying to find ways that we're going to fight back. So what do? Anybody ever tried removing local admin privileges? Yeah, lots of fun. So the fight back for enforcing, non-admin rights is people said, you know what? What's the value of this domain thing anyhow? Why do I need to be part of a domain? And I'll tell you, I actually asked this same question. I went to Microsoft in Charlotte, North Carolina, sat down with their kernel debug team because I was trying to understand why the Windows logon process was so damn slow. And we would sit there and we're pouring through user init logs and user env log, and we're looking through each line trying to figure out what it all was. And in the back of my pocket, I kept my Mac. So I just kept comparing it. Nope, still slower than a Mac. Nope, still slower than a Mac. And the guy's basically getting frustrated with me from Microsoft. He's like, of course it's going to be slower than a Mac. We have group policies, and we are enforcing domain security and all these other things. And in reality, this is what my users did. Disjoin from the domain, connect to a file share. Well, look at it. They put a freaking checkbox right on the screen that says, remember my credentials, so that you don't need to enter your password every single time. Well, that's great for file shares, but what about Outlook? Same damn thing. And we fast forward to, to present day, and are people really struggling not being on the domain? Because now they're using a Mac and they're running into these exact same prompts all day long. I pose to you, being a member of your domain doesn't do you a damn bit of good. All it does is frustrate the user and forces them to want to bypass it, disjoin from the domain, to get themselves a little bit of control back. But that's just for the smart users, right? Well, what do? You put it on the wiki, and you help raise the intelligence quotient down to the lowest possible denominator. So I love all these admin right discussions because this is what the city of Miami, and this is current day stuff, right? This is today, Windows 7, TCO studies. We have been able to take away administrative rights down to only 5% of our users. Anybody here have only 5% of their users with local admin? There are a few. That's admirable. Well, in reality, sorry, let's try that with the right button. We tried that too. We had what we always called our contingent workforce, right? And I even brought mine, with me I thought I did. I guess that one fell to the bottom of the bag. But on a nice little boot fob, you plug the stick in, and up comes Loft Crack. Now, a lot of you guys are sitting there going, oh, please. This is way beyond the capabilities of my user. Well, I've got the stick in my bag somewhere. You plug it in, you hit enter 3 times, and I actually demonstrated this at Managed Fusion a few years back, where during the session, I had a guy come up, set the local administrator password on my laptop, hit enter, and by the end of the session, I was able to show everybody what he chose for a local admin password on that box. When you're dealing in a world of precompiled tables like Rainbow Tables and Jack the Ripper, once you grab a copy of that NTLM hash out of the registry on the system, it's game over. And this is running it on a laptop. If you want to actually farm this thing out and run it on, Amazon Web Services to crack it a little bit faster, that's a great way to do it. So this is great. This get the guy local admin rights. But now, here's my next question, you guys. How many of you use the same local administrator password across your entire fleet of laptops? You'll admit it? Thank you. So think about this. What does he have? He doesn't just have a key to the kingdom of his own laptop. He has a key to the kingdom of every laptop. What's the chances that you might have even used that same local admin password on your VDI VMs? You now have the keys to the kingdom, and you're now forced into a world of needing to manage local administrative rights. So what do you guys do? Because I was one of you once. We start rolling the password. Oh, I change my local admin password once a week. Well, again, I just demonstrated you can crack the local admin password in under an hour. So that means that 6 days and 23 hours, you're unprotected. But that 59 minutes, it's great. So I turned back to my friends at Altiris, and what did I do? I deployed another agent. Now I'm going to run right along all of the other agents. I'm going to add one more little thing that's going to go and start managing the local admin process so that I can keep track of what password somebody is using. Basically, resistance was futile at this point. What this did get for me, though, is it got me to a unique local admin password. That was really powerful, so that the guy that did crack it, basically all he did was compromise his one system, so it did lower my span of attack greatly, so that worked out well. Now, if you guys are like me, one of these days you're going to walk into a meeting room with your shiny new Dell Ultrabook, and you're going to sit down next to these guys, all rocking their latest and greatest MacBook Pros, not giving a care in the world to what the IT guy is in the room for, but happy as a clam when it comes to doing this. So IT had a great solution for what we're going to do on this one, and we're going to give everybody a copy of Fusion. So now I can ignore the Mac problem that I've got and just give them a virtual machine. Anybody here a Mac user? Anybody here not have a copy of Fusion? It's all yours. See? Now, the rules of the session were that I wasn't allowed to tell you guys how great VMware View is because I work there, but nothing in the contract, and I looked at every word, said that I couldn't give you a copy of VMware View. So then what do people do? They go and they install a copy of Windows. So here you go. I got a shrink-wrapped copy of Vista, never been opened, that you can go and you can install yourself in your own Windows copy. Because these are the questions that follow once somebody gets their hands on Fusion. Where do I get Windows? What's an ISO? Followed by, can you tell me our license key? Which, sends people back to the wiki. And then this is my favorite one, right? They got a Mac, but now they're asking, how do I join the domain? Because they get to that screen. NAT bridged, what the? Anybody ever tried to join to the domain while behind a NAT? Yeah, that's usually a pretty fun exercise. Followed by, why is Altiris installing? And I'm getting all of these freaking systray icons lining up again all over the place. So IT's approach to managing Macs in the enterprise of just saying, here we're just going to let you go and run a VM, all that did was essentially reintroduce frustration in the form of a VM so that it's really easy to reset and revert back to the days when Altiris wasn't on the machine, or when the machine wasn't joined to the domain, and gets them back to where the users really wanted to be in the first place. So that takes us then to the wonderful world of bring your own networks. So this has been one of the classic examples of FUIT. Things like a nice little MiFi card that you can press and bring your own network. Why would you do such a thing? Well, it started with things like this. So here's my wonderful Zscaler authentication page that notices that I'm trying to get to something. And then behind this, it's always even more fun because it starts to it's not that I'm going to stop you from going to this page, but maybe you could tell me a little bit about what this BriForumerization, sorry, I almost got almost got it down. Maybe you could tell me a little bit more about what this site is all about so that I can do it. And that's where these things just started walking in off the street. And needless to say, they were highly disruptive. No policy, no control, takes you straight out to the internet from whatever type of device. So what do? We say, okay, we're gonna keep an eye out for open SSIDs. And being a network company, it was really clever because there's actually rogue access point detection that you can do, where you can turn rogue access point detection on the network. Keep an eye out for multiple MAC addresses coming in from behind a common MAC. Gives you a little bit more granular control over where rogue devices might be coming in. But then comes along the wonderful world of iPhone tethering, where now it doesn't need to actually go and create a wireless network. You can just plug it in and think about it. It's running over the exact same 3G network that the guy's cell phone is using all day long. So the fact that you can now flip on tethering and plug this into the USB port, once again, it's effectively game over for bring your own network type use cases, walking right in the back door, right in the front door of your enterprise, every single day. Getting ready for this session was one of extra interest to me because, so I'm doing this whole presentation. I'm using SlideRocket, which is our PowerPoint-ish, cloud-based PowerPoint-ish thing. And I heard Brian say at the speaker intro, yeah, we'll have a hardwired connection if you need to be able to plug in. We've got dongles for everybody. This was actually a really interesting day for us because when all of these devices started coming in, what did the MacBook Air pose? The MacBook Air did it, the iPad did it, the iPhone did it. I'm looking as hard as I can, and I can't find where to plug in the network cable into one of these things. So we were one of those companies that said, we want to make sure that the wireless network is just as every bit as secure as a wired network. And so we get into all these different fun and exciting encryption policies that you can put around wireless. So here's the fun little drop-down, right? Cisco Leap. Well, that was great, right? Leap was nothing more than using the NTLM hash that I just talked about how easy it is to compromise. It was using the NTLM hash as a way to transmit your credentials to authenticate to the wireless. I actually don't know what semantic NAC transparent mode is, but Andy will tell me later what that one is. Then we started getting into all these other fun ones, right? Eat Fast, Eat GTC. We had all of these complete one-off security policies that we enforced, and we always made sure that when we bought laptops that we had an Intel driver that supported Eat Fast or that supported Cisco Leap. Anybody remember Cisco compatible extensions? Right? You had to look for the CCX compatible designation in order to be able to get your device on the network. Well, guess what? When MacBook Airs and iPads and iPhones, and for that matter, Palm Pilots start coming in with Wi-Fi access that don't support one of these crazy one-off networks, you as an IT guy are kind of left back to the choice. Do I continue to enforce my lockdown policy of only my super secure wireless network, or am I going to drop down the lowest common denominator, which results in this guy getting set up right next to it to say, if IT isn't going to do it, I have no problem configuring WEP 40-bit. And thank God you don't know my phone number, or half of you would be on my wireless network right now. Isn't it great that it was 10 digits? And if you ever try to come up with a 10-digit phone number, phone numbers work great. If you want to be extra secure, at least use your in-laws' phone number. Helps disguise it a little bit. So that was kind of this world of users trying to bring their own networks in order to make their devices work and make them accessible. So now we get into the world of MYOD, or manage your own device. How many people here have Exchange ActiveSync in their environments? And how many people have PIN protection? How many people are using strong PIN protection? Oh, you guys are just like masochistic. That's a surefire way to take you to what the users are sure to want to do, which is, let's go and take a look at that profile provisioning. How many of you are not signing your provisioning profiles? Please. I'd like to think that that was reality, but for so long, all of the Apple provisioning files that went out were nothing more than text. So here was my provisioning profile that got distributed around. Right? The users have already shown us with VBScript that they know how to associate a document with Notepad. So let's take the .mobile config file that you're passing around in the enterprise, and let's just do a right-click, open with the text editor, and take a look. Interesting. Force pin equals true. So you're telling me if I just go into this section of the text file and delete the force pin equals true, I now don't have the pin getting enforced. Well, that sounds great, but then in subsequent releases, Exchange ActiveSync started double-checking that this force pin true was always in play. Which takes us to, it's even easier now when you're jailbroken, because now you're not going in and needing to do anything at all in terms of editing these text files. A lot of people get into secure device provisioning models, where you go out to a secure web server and over HTTPS, it hands down the mobile config file, to which you just open an iFile. It allows you to go back into that pin setting, drop the pin setting section out, save it, open up the file and import it. That's all great. And if you're really, really lazy and you just want to do this with one click, my favorite of all applications, Exchange Unlock. So now you don't even need to think about it. You just go out to Cydia, pick on Exchange Unlock, hit go. Lots of different MDM software out there trying to talk about how to go and detect if a device is jailbroken, such as the Time Warner Cable application, which then has, I think it is something like FUIT, which goes in and actually resets the parameters that Time Warner Cable's application is looking for to lie to Time Warner Cable to tell it, no, I'm not jailbroken. Please allow me to access content. Real life, it's on my iPad. I'll show anybody here to prove it. So all of these things sound great. Again, everybody kind of keeps coming back to the idea that it's limited to the upper echelon of technical people. So my favorite one that I saw was a guy around two-factor authentication. And I hate to say it, when I joined VMware, I even saw some of the same practice, right? I'm allowed to VPN in. I'm allowed to connect into my View connection server once and only once using my login. Anybody have similar policies where you can only log in once with a set of credentials to avoid people from logging in multiple? So what do you do when it comes time to needing to share that PIN across multiple devices? Or what if you're in a team of other people that occasionally need to have both your laptop and your iPad connected, and you start creating your little circle of friends and circle of trust? Well, what we discovered our users were doing was quite simple. They took a $20 VGA camera, pointed it at the desk, and they actually took video of their Secure ID fob and they streamed it over Slingbox. This allowed them on any device that they could bring up Slingbox to bring up a live video feed and see the rolling digits of their Secure ID fob. I dropped the slide that said every example in here is absolute truth. I couldn't make this shit up. Sending out video of Secure ID fobs, I thought this was one of my favorite FUITs that I'd come across. I went back and I talked to the team since I've gone to VMware. I asked them, have you come across anybody else doing this thing where they want to share their fob either between multiple devices or across multiple users? And they're like, oh yeah, they just use Skype auto answer for that now. So I didn't have that one in my deck because I wasn't around to see that one firsthand. But yeah, they just create, DA staffo.secureid on Skype, and you can just call into that and auto answer, and up comes the rolling pin with a quick cam pointing down at the screen. Tried our best to get around it. So many of the things that we have done have been focused on trying to do device management. And how do we lock down the machine? How do we increase the policy? How do I beat them at their own game when it comes to scripts and everything else? And that took us to the land then of network-based enforcement. And after I got off a really cool project that was amazingly successful, I had the discreet honor of being named to the Network Admission Control team to go off and advance NAC. Anybody ever try to deploy NAC? Anybody do it successfully? I like the honesty. It is certainly running. So network admission control, for those that haven't ever gotten real into it, right? In some of the initial versions of NAC, they had this genius idea called the posture agent. It sounds like a cure for scoliosis. The posture agent was this little, again, what do? We add more agents. We add an agent to read the other agents. And the posture agent's job was to go into the system and look to make sure the antivirus was up to date, that they didn't disable the encryption software, all these different methods. And once it was all said and done, it would issue a statement of health back to the policy server to say, this guy is all good to go. Allow his MAC address to pass. And that's great, but anybody ever seen a NAC posture agent for a printer? And if you think about it, all they were doing is authorizing a MAC address in order to get going. So I kid you not, my 2-year-old, this is what he does in his spare time. He walks in to my office, he presses the button until it spits out a test page, and guess what comes out on the test page? Out it spits the MAC address of the printer that wasn't able to run a NAC agent in the beginning. If you're not familiar with this, every MAC address has what's called an OID prefix. OID prefixes are assigned to individual vendors. So if you were one of the vendors that didn't support running a NAC agent, I don't know, HP printers or at early days, Apple Macintosh, this is something that people have been trained how to do for ages, which is just go in and change your MAC address or your OID prefix to match that of a printer, and you no longer have to deal with this pesky thing called NAC anymore. And if right-clicking on the network adapter was too difficult for you, anybody ever gone into a Linksys console where it says clone my MAC address? Yeah, if you need the one-click equivalent of being able to bypass MAC address authentication, you always have that as a fallback option. Yes. Download 2 ready-made tools to automatically adjust the MAC address. So physical address as a security point. Guys, we learned this, right? Remember in the early days of wireless LANs where you actually had to register every single MAC address as that extra degree of filtering? We're freaking nuts. So coming to some of the final ones at the end. Bridging the air gaps. So in a technical community like Crisco, we had these 3 different environments, right? You had your dev, test, and production. And each one of these networks had to be very, very careful and air-gapped because you don't want some rogue version of spanning tree leaking onto your production network and having the spanning tree protocol go, up across the entire network, because you could literally create a denial of service if you were to have your labs span over into control. So this is one of my favorite ones. We teach everybody that they need to be so good and careful about air-gapping their networks, and we forgot about air-gapping one thing. So what my users brought in were power line networking adapters. Anybody ever use these things? Are they not as simple as a toaster to use? You plug this one into the jack, you plug this one into the other jack, and it works. It just freaking works. Does anybody share a building with another company? Maybe one floor up, one floor down? More importantly, does anybody share a common building circuit breaker with another company? Because yes, it's really cool. There's this button, one button on the whole device. And again, if you've dealt with these things, you know, you plug them both in, and then if you read the instructions, which why would you? Because you plugged it in and it's already working. You plug it in, and what you do is you press and hold it on the one end, and it starts blinking. And you go to the other end, and you press the button, and it creates an encrypted channel. So now it's the kind of thing where even if you've got somebody plugging in power line networking adapters to see if it works, they're not going to be able to discover it because it's all encrypted communication, and you'll never actually figure out who was doing it in the first place. This is exactly how my users were extending their labs so that they could sit comfortably in their cube where it was about 15 degrees warmer and sit and be able to get their jobs done. So again, I call this on Twitter, I call this my box of contraband. Right? These are the types of things that desktop techs would pick up and would bring back to IT and say, are guys supposed to be using these? Because this is what all of his equipment in his desk was plugged into. So it's one thing when you've got desktop techs running around the building looking under desks and keeping their eye out for these types of things, but it's even more fun when you can do this all in the privacy of your own home. So one of the things that every employee at my old company got, and this is an old one. Anybody recognize one of these? This is a VPN 3002 hardware client, which effectively is nothing more than a hardware instantiation of the IPsec software client. And we had these so that we could take home our IP phones and be able to plug in a hardwired IP phone in order to be able to get that to work. So as these things started going out into the homes of our employees, now we don't even have the ability for a tech to go and walk around and spot these types of things happening under the desk. Because you go and you plug this in, by the way, where do you get the group secret? It's on the Wiki, right? So you get the group secret, you fill out the username and password. Now I'm not just authenticating once for my one machine, I'm doing it for my whole house. And Windows makes it so convenient for you to select the adapter that's connected to the home router, to your home network, right-click, bridge connections, game over, right? So now it traverses all the way back to that wireless access point so that now you can use your wireless IP phones, you can sit down in the comfort of your chaise lounge out on the back porch and surf away at the corporate intranet. So, in summary, just bringing it all home, right? And please just take a moment and enjoy this comic because I paid $14 for rights to redistribute and publish this in a public forum. So please do your best to get $14 worth of enjoyment out of this. Yes, this is allowed. Go ahead, take a picture because I've got the and it's under license. It's 118708 for the recording in the back. Guys, we're fighting a losing battle, right? So how many of us, I love this question, right? How many of us are the IT support guy for our home networks and our family networks? Okay? And I apologize for those that don't have kids. If I asked your third grade class of your third grader, if I walked into the classroom and said, excuse me, Mrs. McKinney, excuse me, children, how many of you are the IT support group for your home or your extended family? I think I would see about the same number of hands going up to say that, yes, I'm the IT support. These guys are coming with the inherent knowledge of how to just get their stuff to work. And no matter what I ever tried to do, trying to beat them at their own game, it was foolishness. And in most cases, it resulted in less security than I began with because now I'm driving people to do things like split tunneling and bridging connections on home routers in order to get access to these things, rather than adopting a slightly more liberal remote access policy around some of these different technologies. So it's a losing battle if you're trying to attack or beat them at their own game. I love some of the stuff that I think Brian and Gabe did for RIM, where your users know how to Google. And if the users don't know how to do it, well, their third grade kids know how to Google it for them and bring this type of information back into the enterprise in order to have this be a real disruption. So with that, I'll turn it back over to any questions that people might have about horror stories or things that you're seeing in your environment that you think would be for the benefit. And otherwise, I'll wrap it there and just say thanks everybody very much for coming and allowing me to share these anecdotes. Actually two quick plugs. The first is Matt Kosht, if I'm Kosht, apologize. Amazing FUIT content session coming right after this that really takes it from that balance of IT versus end user. He and I got to talk a little bit about some of the content and war stories. Really would encourage people to do that. And of course, thank you to the company that made it possible for me to be here. Scott Davis has a great session coming up on kind of the expanding world of desktop virtualization and where we see that going in the future. So, question in the back.
Actually, I recall there was a nice slide earlier in your presentation where you talked about the speed limit sign and how to sort of not get compliance. And then, or on the right-hand side, you had the preferred way.
Right.
Keeping that same kind of construct in mind, can you give us a good example of a brilliant approach to solving that problem in the real world like the problem?
Certainly, certainly. So the challenge that we were faced with is we were trying to policize our way out of everything. And we were trying to get very, very granular. So the acceptable use policy that people had to click, we actually got that into our code of business conduct so that it was almost like the honor code that you will not intentionally defeat or bypass or reverse engineer IT administrative agents. And we tried to be very, very specific about saying, you are not going to go and do these things. And then the discussion that resulted around that is, well, what does it really mean to intentionally bypass? Am I intentionally bypassing it if I plug into a Starbucks? Is that intentionally bypassing? And people tried to basically get all lawyer-ese on us in trying to prevent this. So now if you look at a lot of what the IT policies have evolved into, is it's not trying to be so granular about all the different ways. I mean, this is akin to the guy on the airplane telling you, please turn off your iPhones, your iPods, your Amazon Kindles. Well, do you really want her to keep listing every single device that you need to turn off? Or do we need to start helping people understand the broader context? So that's what a lot of the policies have evolved from and to. It's gone from don't do these specific actions and more into broad-based, it is imperative to protect your asset. And by the way, like Exchange Unlock is a great example. These devices are now carrying both personal and corporate, helping them understand that they're protecting themselves just as much as they're protecting the company. The more that you can raise these up and get away from the British term, the gnat's ass, broaden the discussion into understand the principle of what it is that you're trying to protect and help educate the user that they're not only helping to make for a more secure environment for themselves, for the company and their peers and coworkers. So I think that was really what my main theme around that one was, is trying to get so granular is really a setup for failure. Other comments, thoughts, or my favorite would be ways that your users took it to you.
I used to run Slingbox on port 443 just because I knew that my company only let traffic out on 80 and 443, but they didn't actually qualify what kind of traffic it was. So my Slingbox was for watching madness on 443 that nobody
Brilliant.
noticed.
Yeah,
Brilliant.
We would do 22. It was ridiculously easy to get an SSH, to get IT to allow SSH to Windows Server box.
Yes.
So that we could reroute RDP over that and connect to the server box and see a port 22.
Exactly. And I'll hit you in one quick one, right? On both of those, this is how the original iPhone, remember the iPhone before Exchange ActiveSync was on the device? Right? So what did my users do? They did SSH port forwarding of IMAP so that they could actually come in over their PC on 22 and be able to hit it on SSH in order to get their email outside the firewall, because at that time there was no VPN for the iPhone, there was no Exchange ActiveSync and so forth. In the back.
SSH
Fantastic, fantastic. Yeah, I mean, this is one, right? So my brother works for a mid-sized bank in mid-Michigan. Eventually, he went with the iPad that has the 3G, right? That was kind of his game over. But prior to that, it was much as what you were saying. All of these devices now, any Synology users? I know there's at least one. That was actually for a tweet up later on for like lovers of Synology. Synology has a built-in VPN server. So now you've got this wonderful ability where you can just actually go and just VPN in. And again, you just change to a non-default port. And now you can VPN right back into your home to get back into an environment that you're comfortable with. And plus, that's where your data and your games and everything else are. And I struck out a lot of things from these things that I think are just intuitively obvious, right? The USB drive coming in as a means of migration. Well, yeah, it's great that you used a USB drive to migrate, but did you really go back and delete all the data off that USB drive? One of the things that I had to do is I had to manage the release of 10,000 employees that got pink slipped. And it was one thing for me to be able to try and get these people to, turn in their device. But guess what happens when the manager and the employee are both let go on the same day? Well, what I had is lovely parting gifts. These weren't people copying the data off onto their laptops. It was, well, shit, I'm getting canned too. Take the damn laptop. I don't care. So we would literally be going out on eBay, and we were spotting our asset tags in pictures on eBay of legitimate, corporate assets that had been leaked out. Never mind these were leased assets that did have to be returned, and if they weren't returned, we actually had to buy out the leases on those devices. And when you do mass layoffs to the tune of 10,000, that can be a real money maker. So I invite anybody that has comments or questions, catch me here, catch me anytime during the show. And thanks everybody very, very much for coming. I hope you enjoyed the session.